Good day. The tools we use for our development are from Anywhere Software. What I've done is to create rapid application development tools like B4A, B4J, B4R, and B4I. So for B4A, you develop Android application. B4I, you develop iOS. B4J is desktop and web. And then B4R is your embedded system, your itinerary, your robots, and all sorts of other things. So we use B4J with Banana transpiler, which actually converts B4J code to JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. So what we're going to be showing today is our next project when it comes to low-code development. I want to indicate that the data that has been used in the project is made out of fake data that we have been using. We generate fake data for our contacts and our categories and things like that to demonstrate the purpose of the application. So what I've done is to create an address book, which basically is kind of a relational system where you have your categories, you have provinces, where you're able to capture a contact list that is going to have a link to a province, a link to a category, and things like that. I'm going to show you. So this version that we're doing is actually developed with NoSQL. We're using CouchDB, which is basically a NoSQL database. It's using JSON to store the content inside of it. The good thing about this database is that you are able to sync with it. You are able to work offline in your mobile application, and then where online you can sync information to your server database. This works well for installation scenarios where, for example, you are having a VPS and hosting your particular application. For example, after you install this, because it comes using Windows, macOS, and Ubuntu Linux, so you are able to run it. So this is the user interface for the database backend when you run it. So I've created a username here, root and password root123 exclamation mark. So I'm going to log into it. So as you can see here, there's currently no database that is here, but there are other settings that you can set up for your backend and then deploy this. So you install this and set calls, and then you are able to have your application running, so this can also be used on Node.js and things like that. But I'm going to demonstrate an application that I've developed so that it uses this as a backend. The front end is using IndexedDB, which is actually a database that is hosted on the browser, and then it has sync functionalities. So the way that we do that is use this particular library here. It's called PouchDB. For example, you create a database, PouchDB, and then you save information to it. Then here you can watch for changes that happen, and then you can replicate or sync to it. So our application is built using this JavaScript library. So as I indicated that we're using this rapid application deployment tool here. So what we've done is to actually create a B4X library that is basically going to work with these tools. It's called SithasoDaisy. It's based on the DaisyUI Tailwind component library. But what you do here, you're able to drag and drop your components into an abstract designer, and then you're able to create your user interfaces and things like that. So the DaisyUI Tailwind is actually here. It's version 5.3.9 right now. And then what we did was to get the CDN version of it here. And then, for example, it has various components that it has here, like your avatar. And then this gives you the HTML in terms of how it's being built and all sorts of other things. So we actually took this component library and then created SithasoDaisy5 to make it to be able to work with the B4J environment. you know. So that's how basically we have managed to do this. So because we're using the P4J tool, what I've done is to create a project called Address Book PouchDB, which basically is a project based on an address book, but using PouchDB as a backend database. So I'm going to activate this project here. This project, as I've been building low-code tool, I've created about 3 projects already. One was using IndexedDB as a backend, which basically means that it was storing data on your browser without seeing functionality. And then I did another project that was going to store information on a Pocket Base. Pocket Base work like Firebase and Superbase. So what it does, it's a SQLite web server that you can just install on your computer. It's a single file. It just has all of these functionalities to create your backend, your collections. Like for example, here there's messages, post and message report. Then you can define your schema, and then it's very nice to use platform, you know, to host your information for your databases, and then you can extend it with JavaScript. I've been able to write some hooks here to do some particular things. Like for example, this uses REST API to communicate with the database. And fortunately, you can create your own routers. So I've created some hooks like this to actually make me do more things in relation to the database itself. Like for example, access it directly and write some information into the database or read something, all right? And then it does have a web API reference where it does indicate in terms of how do you use fetch to actually perform some particular transactions to your database. So that's one of the program examples that I created. The other one was using PHP and MySQL, using PHP CRUD API. So the nice thing about this PHP CRUD API is you just add it to your project, and then you're able to have a REST API for your database, where, for example, you can also use Fetch for it to write, to read, and then to update and to delete transactions in your database. So this PHP CRUD API, which works with PHP, and it is able to connect to other databases like MySQL, Postgres, SQL Server, SQLite. I've also tested SQLite before with it. I haven't done SQL Server as yet. I did test Postgres with it, and it was working very well. So the next example that I'll do, of course, is to do with the one with SQL Server, because I want to have a functionality of a CRUD application that demonstrates in terms of how it works in relation to all of these back-end databases that might be used by developers to develop their particular projects. So as I was indicating, the address book that we're dealing with today is the one that is developed using PouchDB. So what I've done here is to actually have environmental variables that are created in the nv.json file to keep content that I'm going to be using in my application. Like for example, the port that I'm going to be using, the address book, the username, and then the password. These are, of course, I think that should be hidden to the end users or when it's published. So we've created an application using some components, like I was indicating, DaisyUI, to make it work with P4J. We created some custom layouts where, for example, here, for example, this one is a drawer, and then it has a menu and a navigation bar, and then this is the page view where our multi-page will show, and then it has a right drawer, and then a text, and then a button here to do some other things. So within your custom views, you're able to define the properties in terms of how you want things to look like. Like for example, here, this is the button, but you can indicate the text, you can indicate the color, whether it has a badge, what's the tooltip about, the color of the tooltip, and all sorts of other things like the left icon here. So this is a button that can have properties, and then the HTML that you see will be based on the properties that are basically here. Like, for example, here, if you go to actions, I think button. So this is the definition of a button here. There's the HTML that builds it, and then it's going to appear like this. So basically, with our RAP application development tool, we're creating the HTML of that particular button based on the properties that we're feeding here. So like, for example, we have another abstract designer layout here. So this one has a table of categories and then a model dialog, So as soon as you place this particular component in your abstract designer, it will create the HTML behind in terms of based on the properties that you are building here, and then you have your events and all sorts of other things. So the application itself is written in B4J, and then we're using Banana, which is actually a transpiler. The current version is 9.1, a transpiler that takes all of this code and then it converts it to JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. So as you can see, the code looks like Visual Basic or .NET because the P4X programming language is following the same methodology and all sorts of things. So our application will start, it reads the contents of the environment variables that we saved, and then it reads what is in there. So you can change this information to actually suit your needs, and then it will start the PG index model. So there's some kind of experience that you might have to have in relation to understanding how the P4X programming language works and things. But to create the application itself with a low-code tool, you don't need to know how to code and all sorts of things, because as soon as you understand what is it that you want to build and how it will look like, then as I had demonstrated before, then you can just create it based on the ideas that we currently have. So all of this code has been explained before in terms of how it works. So the application itself has different pages: the categories page, the contacts page, what else is here? The dashboard and provinces. And then this is just a fake data generator, as I was indicating that the content that we'll be seeing here is generated based on fake data. So for example, this is our fake class generator. So you can define the fields that we want to be generated, and then what it does is, depending on what kind of information that we have, then it generates, like for example, get records with a structure. You provide it with a structure as a map here, and then you tell it how many records you want, and then it generates those particular records, so it does that. And then if you look in terms of how it does this, for example, if you're saying that you want a vehicle type, it generates a random vehicle type from this one and gives you a single vehicle type. If you want a vehicle make, it will give you any of these vehicle makes. Some of the data that is here, I use ChatGPT just to generate a list of these things in terms of what would be the kind of categories, what would be the income categories, and all sorts of other things. Like for example, this one generates a hex color. So we know that hex colors, for example, are between 1 and 0 and 155. So that's what it does here. Age range between 0 to 12, 10, 13 to 19, adult, and all sorts of other things. Payment status, payment providers, industries, random password, depending on the setting, for example, where they have uppercase, lowercase numbers, and then special characters, country names. So that's how the fake generator is currently working. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this particular project. It's going to be deployed to Laragon. What we're doing as a development server, we're currently using Laragon. So if you run this, it's going to deploy everything to Laragon. Laragon is a very useful web server that you can use to develop your application and test them and all sorts of other things. I find it very nice to use because you just have everything that you have in it. You know, it comes with Apache, MySQL, and other things. You can easily configure it and all sorts of things. This can be used for development. This can be used for commercial purposes, you know, and it just makes life easy. You don't have to crack your skull about setting up all sorts of other things and all sorts of other things. So current version is 8. I think they last stopped creating a free, the latest free version, yeah, is 6. Of course, 8.3 is free for personal use and all sorts of other things, not for commercial use. I mean, the CithasoDaisy5 is open source, you know. It's available on GitHub, so if you want it, you just go there, and then you're able to get there and use it to develop your application. The source code is available here. Like, yeah, this is the source code of this particular project. You know, this is a pre-configured version of my Pocket Base, you know, that I'm currently using to bootstrap my projects. SithasoDaisy5 is there, the source code is there, the demo source code is there, so you will find when you actually install this particular project, you know, copy to your additional libraries, you'll find that inside the files themselves, there are licenses based on what we're currently using, MIT licenses and some others. So you'll currently find them here. So what I'm indicating here is we've built a CRUD application. We did it with IndexedDB, which is this one. We've created it before X template for it now. A SQL REST one that uses MySQL, Pocket Base one, and all sorts of other things. So this next one is actually based on this particular backend CouchDB, which has sync functionality, which basically means that you're able to work in remote areas with your data captured on your mobile device, and then we're online, then it can just quickly sync with it. And then I demonstrated yet that the database itself at this particular moment is actually blank. So I also explained how this abstract design template works. So what we're going to be doing now is just run the application. You know, tested the application, decoded it. When you start the application here, these are some of the instructions that you have in terms of how to set up your development environment, because I'm going to make this to be a before X template so that when you just go to your file, new, then you are able to have it here to bootstrap a new project in it. So if, for example, you select this one, you'll create a CRUD project that was generated with low-code tools that will actually save your data to Bananas to IndexedDB. It's using Banana SQL for talking to the IndexedDB. This one is using the PHP CRUD API to talk to MySQL. This one is using Pocket Base. This does not need PHP, you know. So this one also does not need PHP to be able to run. Because we were using PouchDB, which is basically JavaScript. So you won't see the JavaScript per se here because I have indicated that this particular project is developed using B4X, and then it transpiles this B4X into JavaScript and then publish it to Laragon. So let's run the application to actually see how it works. So this starts the B4J tooling system, which actually just compiles and checks that there are no bugs and things like that in the application. So if there are bugs, it's going to indicate to you that there is a bug here, fix it there, and things like that. And then what it does, Banana takes over, and then it generates the CSS, JavaScript, and then the HTML that you need, and then it publishes that to your folder. The folder that I indicated that I'll publish to is Laragon www, so which is basically that what I'm going to show you now. So we'll wait for this thing to finish transpiling the source code, which basically is just converting it to JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. And then after that, we go and see the content of what is there. And also the application will basically start a browser, and then it will basically run. Okay, let's just wait for it, because now it's doing what it is doing. But anyway, if for example we were to go to this particular folder now, the subdomain, if I can call it that, it will be that one, STP address book. So there's a www folder there. So it's going to save the information that it's saving here. As you can see, it's going to compile and write things here. These are the assets, scripts, and styles. For example, here, this one is empty because it's currently compiling the project itself. You see, so it clears everything that is there. Assets also, okay, there's some assets that are here because I indicated that it mustn't clear the assets folder. But let's just wait for it to finish. So what you could do, as soon as it publish and you're happy with the application, you just open FTP, publish your project to a web server that is publicly accessible, and then you're able to access your project via the internet. So that's how easy it becomes. So we'll wait for the compilation of this particular project until it finishes. So some other things that we've been doing basically is to have, for example, the low-code tool. The low-code tool is built using the tools that I'm just showing you. And let's just go to GitHub and then see in terms of what we've done. We have created a tool using the same methodology that I was just showing you now. And then we published the running executable of the local tool to GitHub. And then we linked it to Vercel. It basically meant that as soon as we publish via the automation, then our Vercel application is updated. So let me see how far is this. Okay, this is almost done. Okay, cool. Now this did everything that it needed to do. We have not retaken our application as yet. That's why you're seeing all of these red things. But this is our running application. It's opened in the browser. Now if you go here, okay, I showed you the assets. I showed you the scripts. These are the scripts that are there. Some of these are loaded when needed. So you might see some of these things here, and we have not retaken our application. So that's why you'll see a lot of things here. And then these are the CSS files. And then this is our index file. Because our application is dynamic in a way. So opening this, you won't see the code that makes the whole application here, because feeding of the application itself at runtime is done by JavaScript code. So it's not a static web application, Just do this. So it's not a static web application here. So as you'll see here, these are some of the JavaScript and CSS things that we need. And then this is some of the code that is in the application. So the logic in terms of how the application works is actually in the JavaScript file that gets generated. So for this particular application here, our app is actually sitting in this particular JavaScript file. So it's 214 KBs, not taken as yet, but this is what basically the banana transpiler has generated based on the our interpreter is taking for Laura. Okay, look, these are based on the class names that are there and things like that. So basically our code is sitting here, the code of the applications that you'll just be seeing on our browser. This includes everything else that I have written. I've wrapped. This basically means that it will be your SithasoDaisy5 and some of the applications that we're basically using code. Okay, so let's move away from there. So this is our CRUD application. It has a dashboard. Contacts, we have 6. Provinces, we have 8. Categories, we have 7. And then we have a gender split chart. And then the later distribution in terms of, for our contacts, how many start with A, how many start with C, H, etc., etc. So this application, as I'm indicating, a single page application, which basically means that as soon as we click something here, the whole content that you saw before gets wiped, and then this particular content gets shown. Also with this one, the content that you saw before gets wiped and then it's showed. So our CRUD application currently is saving all of the information in IndexedDB that is meeting the structure of PouchDB. So if you go here, this is our IndexedDB database where this information is saved in. I'm still trying to get my hang around this particular database here, which is very, very interesting. But this some of the data that is stored here. Okay, document store, deleted or local store, metadata, and all sorts of other things. Quite a lot is going on here. Now remember, this database has sync functionalities. It basically means that somewhere, it needs to keep revisions of the data that it stores for sync functionality between the various databases that we have. So as you saw before, we had in a napka, we added a button and we specified a tooltip sync database, and we said the color of the tooltip should be primary. So this is our button that is what's on the navigation bar. If you don't remember, if you go back to the code, let me just show you where that is. On this space layout here, this here, we said it's btn sync. It's sitting inside that particular component. The color is success, which basically is the green color that you see here. And then what we said was the tooltip should be sync database, which basically you see that tooltip is sync database there, and then the color of the tooltip is primary. That's why you see it as a primary, and all sorts of things. As I indicated, whatever component you place here will basically generate the HTML that you will see at the end of the day. Like for example, the icon that you see, which is that arrow rotate solid full, is basically that particular icon there. So we use that abstract designer to create the HTML of the hosting structure of our page. Like for example, each and every time you move from page to page, the navigation bar stays the same and the drawer stays the same, but the content that you see here changes, and the content that you see changing is made because you're clearing this particular component here. It's called the page view, and it's sitting inside the content. So each and every time we navigate, we clear that and write content into it at runtime, which basically means that the code that you see that is here is generated at runtime based on the information that is stored in the database. So our dashboard, you click on contacts, it will take you to contacts. You go back, click on provinces, you go back, click on categories, you go back, and all sorts of other things. So this is the gender split between males and female based on the information of the contacts. Remember, the information that is here is based on fake data. So with our fake generator, when you add a contact here, it generates a fake data. Then you can choose the category, you can choose which gender you want to choose, you can choose like the province, so we're just demonstrating here so you can save the particular contact details. So we've moved from 6 to 7, and then what this does is that anchor placeholders, as you will see, if you go to Daisy, go to avatars. These are the avatars, and then the placeholder, that one is a placeholder. Green Spider-Man, wow. These are the placeholders. So this is created using this particular thing here. You see? Now if you go to our application, what you see here is generated by a code like this, but because we've built it using the abstract designer, so it gets to be here. So let's show gender. These are the genders that we have here. Let's show the telephone of the particular person. If you click on an email address here, it activates a default email sending program. Then you can send an email to the particular person. There it is, Outlook, street address, Okay, our column chooser, it helps us just to choose the columns that we want to see in our table. You can show and hide and then activate it either way. And then this is an alpha chooser. So alpha chooser will filter our records based on the full name. For example, the start of the full name is H, you know, the start of the full name is R, and all sorts of other things. Provinces. Let's add a new province. It's in China. Yes. Let's add another one. So as you can see, we're able to create records into our database. Is in Cave. And then you can also delete the province actually, and then delete it, you know, and all sorts of things. Let's generate a report. Provinces report. Let's open it. So what I've done here is to build a fully working CRUD application that has create, upgrade, update, delete. It's also able to produce Excel reports like this one, because at the end of the day, we're saying, let's take the user through the developer through the whole value chain, developing an application, generating reports, generating charts, and then using a different backend to store the information. So that is how currently this application works. Categories, and then you can choose the color that you want to show for your category, you know, then choose the wheel, you know, the color wheel. I like this color wheel. And then you can save. Okay, let's call this text folder 1. Then you can save your color. Okay, so what you see here is the color and a title of that particular category. We've created different kind of components that define in terms of how the information in a particular table will actually show. Like, so we have our contacts as generated from fake data, as that indicated, and then the dashboard information that we currently have here. The dashboard that we're using here are Toast charts, Toast UI charts. It's another Toast UI charts, which is another JavaScript component library for creating beautiful charts. So we have actually integrated it into our library, you know, so there's some beautiful charts that they have here. So what's basically happening is, as I've indicated, the code that is here is written in X, and then it gets transpiled to JavaScript, then it gets published to C drive, Laragon, and then it's actually running inside the web server right now. For example, if you go to menu www, this is our application here. Excuse me. This is our application here, the same application that we're seeing now. Now, as I indicated, we are actually saving our data inside an IndexedDB. But what happens now if you want to sync our data? For example, I've shown you that we have 10 provinces now. We have 8 categories. We have 7 contacts. Let's create another contact here. Don't allow us to save because the full name exists. Okay, there's some checks that we've added also on our application, so that to make sure that we have some things that are not duplicated. The assumptions that we have made is that a full name of a person must be unique. So basically, it won't allow you to add 2 people with the same full name. The mobile number should be different. The email address should be unique, and all sorts of other things. It's just rules that we added. You can add other rules that you want. So we have about 8 contacts now, but the database, as we indicate, is actually blank. The one that hosts our information that will come from everyone will be capturing information online. Assuming that we're offline, and then we want them to actually sync our information. As you can see here, this is actually blank. Now, what we do is to select sync database. So we're finished working, then we sync the database, and then it's going to go through and sync our databases. So documents pushed is 13 contacts. Provinces is 15. Categories is 16. But you see, it pushed more documents than what it's supposed to push, because actually I have 8, 10, and 8. The reason that is because when we were searching in our database, it needs to create indexes. So when you run all documents search in relation to our database, it's going to have more documents, because these are our categories, contacts, and provinces. So categories, these are the categories that it has created, but then it has that other one here, that other one being a design document. And then this particular design document is an index that sorts our categories by name in ascending order, and then you go to contacts, so there's the contact of that particular person. This information is based on the information that we have here, that is sitting in the straight data that we generated. Okay, so let's see. This is a mail. This is their category. This is their email address. Larson Dixon. Okay, let's do this. Dixon. Oh, there is the person. Larson Dixon. What you're doing there is just do a search. Larson Dixon, Halle, Linguoba province. So if you see in our database, this person is city, state, province, because there's a relationship between the province and then the category. It's using the ID of those particular provinces that were selected when we were actually creating this particular person. For example, remember we have a drop down for categories. Basically, it reads the category, and then it also reads the provinces, like key value pairs, So that's what's happening here. And then categories, for example, this is the key, and then there's a text. This is a consultant. The color is that one. Remember, as you can see here, we didn't have a schema that was created here, but because our application already has a schema in relation to how we save the information, it automatically created our schema on our server database. Okay, so provinces, these are the provinces that are there. This is the province Liguara, another province Lombardy, Italy, etc., etc. So this way we're able to actually sync the information from, I want to try something. I'm just going to delete the database that is here. I just want to see if this thing is going to work properly. Assuming that we don't have any database, let's see. Let me just delete all of these databases that are here. I want to do a sync, assuming that you just open the application and then it's empty. Okay, I've deleted all the ones that are based on Pouch. Let me refresh. It's empty. Okay, there's now contacts, there's categories, there's nothing. But now we know that there's content that is here. So what happens if we sync? Let's sync with what is in the server. Document pulled 12, document pulled 14, document pulled 15. Let's refresh our dashboard. Voila. So it has taken the information that is sitting on our server, put it in our application. It basically means that with this kind of database, the power that we have behind this is that you will be able to work offline, sync with the database in the office, and you have the latest information, vice versa, which basically means that no data loss is actually experienced with this kind of application in mind. So as I've been indicating, the information that is here is fake data that we're basically using, but we're just demonstrating the power of a CRUD application that's able to store information in an index DB and then sync it using CouchDB, PouchDB, and JavaScript library. And then you have a user interface that is beautifully created with DaisyUI, and we're using the power of our RUD tools from Anywhere Software. You know, the nice thing about all of these tools is that the code base amongst all of these three native development deliverables is 99.9% the same. You don't have to write before Xcode, you don't have to write Java code, you don't have to write Objective-C or things. The code is just like variant of Visual Basic, and then it just compiles and gives you what is it that you need. Which case in point in relation to this, the code that is running here is actually JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. And we have our single page application working, able to generate the reports that we need, able to generate the charts that we need, Excel reports that we need, and we have a fully functioning full stack application, touching the user interface, touching the back end, touching your code, and it's very easy to maintain. Because the nice thing about all of this is that the code that is here has comments in it, where, for example, this is our contact scripts. There's a lot of comments that we've written here just to indicate to you what's going on. Like, for example, here, there's a table, these are the columns that are there. When the data is mounted, when the data is added, when the data is deleted, and all sorts of other things. And the code, you will notice that it's very easy to use and very straightforward to follow, you know. And it doesn't mean that you do need to know coding, because at the end of the day, this is generated by a low-code tool. So this is what I wanted to discuss today in relation to our latest project, CRUD project using PouchDB, and then the other projects in relation to IndexedDB, relation to MySQL, PHP, REST API. They look actually the same. The thing is the back end that it saves the information into, and also the other one for Pocket Base. All the applications are actually the same, but the thing is we change in terms of the connections to what it needs to write to and how it is. And as you will notice when you get the source code of the applications on this GitHub, you know. So if you go to the repo, at this particular moment, you will find the low code examples, which is basically all the low code example projects that I've done. It's the same project, but using different backends. This one is the browser IndexedDB. This one is PHP, MySQL, and this one is actually the one for Pocket Base. The one for MySQL is actually, if you go to the database here, it's -php admin. And then what we'll do, I'm just going to show you how the information is stored, the login. The structure of the databases are the same, address book, there it is. And then these are the tables that are there, categories. These are the categories, these are the contacts, these are the provinces, and all sorts of other things. So when you get the source code, run your application in B4J and things like that, configure it and all sorts of other things for that one, then you will have to create this application after importing the SQL file, and then you run this particular project, you know. Then the one for Pocket Base, of course, it comes with a pre-configured set of Pocket Base, but if you want to start a Pocket Base project from scratch, you kind of like get to download this Pocket Base source here, and then easy instructions in terms of how do you want to do that and all sorts of other things. Okay, so yeah, this is it. It's been quite an eye-opening exercise to do this particular project, because for all of these projects, as I'm indicating to you, You need to be aware in terms of how the tools behind them work in relation to, I had to learn how the PouchDB works and improve what I had written before to make it work the way that I wanted. And then the sync functionality. The nice thing about that, you can make it live, meaning that each and every time someone adds a content to it, whether it's at the server side or someone else, and then they sync, you're able to trap those particular changes. Okay, this is the Laragon that you can download, which you can use our local tools and then our GitHub repo. Yeah, thank you so much for your time. This is a very powerful PHP REST API library. Grateful that this person spent time writing this. It makes life very easy. You don't have to write your own REST API for MySQL, Postgres, and things. And this is the beauty of a project. I mean, with it working like Supabase and Firebase, it just makes things very nice. I mean, it has server-side events. Actually, I've created a chat application with it before, and it just made life very easy. The thing about Bucket Base also is that when it comes to data loss, it's very minimized because it takes another extra step in terms of how it writes your content into a database. That might be quite useful for some other people, and for some it might not be, because to ensure that you don't lose the data, it follows a three-step kind of a process, kind of a thing. For fast application, you might not necessarily need those three steps, which basically why I had to actually write my own routes to actually bypass some of those test processes. And they are there for a very good reasons. Like, for example, when you create a collection, you create it and you specify rules in terms of who can write to this, who can retrieve information here to there. You can do that. So before data is written or read or deleted in your database, it needs to follow that rule checking process and all sorts of other things and all sorts of other things. With application where, for example, you write your rules in the user interface or back-end scripts and things, and you might not necessarily need that three kind of phased approach, because sometimes you just need a direct call to the database, but on a controlled environment. Okay, these tools are very good tools. I've been using them for quite a while now to develop Android application, iPhone applications and things. They just make life very easy. I mean, I've been using Visual Basic 6 for a very long time, many years ago. So finding a tool that actually helped me to grow in relation to development without having to learn something new in a very steep learning curve, then it just make things easy. Of course, before X is a variant some kind, so you need just to learn how some of the ropes works. There's some videos here about it and things like that, and it makes things easy. I love this component library. When I started with Tailwind and saw the volume of classes that one had to write to actually just create a button, I was wowed. I was like, I'm not ever going to use this thing. It's just too much effort. It's just too much work. Then I found Daisy, and creating a button was just a breeze. Simple HTML button. You have a button that works. It's been a joy to work with. I started with version 2, now it's on version 5. It basically meant that my tools had to evolve and grow as I go along, So I love it. I would recommend anyone who wants to develop websites, web applications with it, just you just go for it. Of course, there are many libraries. I'm not using React, but I'm just finding the general JavaScript applications, This I love because, giving you the functionality to actually sync your databases and things is just amazing. So what I'm going to try to do is actually have my application work offline, and then testing everything else, because currently it's connected to the internet and all sorts of things. But yeah, so I'll be making this source code available on the GitHub repo. Then you can just explore it, run an application, learn from it. and a lot of other things. But yeah, basically this is it. Thank you so much.